Welcome back, students. We are going to take a little bit of a deeper dive in this video, and there's some concepts that either may be completely common to you that you fully understand, or this may be just a really weird concept for you. We're going to look at how the database works, and again, you could take entire courses. People spend their lives learning how MySQL databases work and how to make them work better and all that stuff. But we are just going to give you a very basic overview in this lesson. And so if I were to come over here and I were to see this thing here, I can scroll just a little bit. I'm in localhost phpMyAdmin, and then I clicked on my Smart Scan database, and you'll see that we have all these tables. And I used this analogy before, but basically, you can say that each one of these is kind of like its own spreadsheet. Like people tend to be a lot more familiar with Excel spreadsheets. So this one just has one row, and it has the email settings for UserSpice. So like if I were to come over here to the dashboard and I were to come to tool settings, email, you would see UserSpice SMTP 587, and then if you come over here, you would see UserSpice SMTP 587. So basically, what the database allows you to do is to store this information in a way where, when you make a change through the user interface, you're storing it. So if I were to refresh this page, you would see that that's UserSpice 2 now. And so this is what makes your PHP powerful, the fact that you can store all these things and interact with them in a lot of different ways. So we're going to look at this one here called permissions. And this is a very simple table, but what I want you to understand is the power of the ID. So what's interesting is if we look at the structure of this thing here, if I click the structure tab, you can see that ID has a little key next to it, and that means and that says primary if I hover over it. So what that means, and there's some other things that make this happen, but what that means is that every single time you add something to this table, it gets an auto-generated, like I didn't have to create this ID, it gets an auto-generated and auto-incremented ID. So if I create another one, I'm going to go ahead and change this to capital K since all the rest of them are capital. If I were to create another one, ID 5 would automatically be created. And because of that little primary key thing, it's impossible for me to come back here and create another one. And I can't change this to 1. It'll say, nope, error, doesn't let it happen, and I escape out, and I might even have to refresh the page to get rid of that error. Like it's such a pain in the butt. So the idea is that these IDs mean that instead of referring to user, then a lot of times what you'll do is you'll refer to the ID, and there's a reason for that. So let's say that I decide that I don't want to call this group administrator anymore. Maybe I want to call it admin. Okay, if I had, and I don't really need to do that, but if I were to come through here and delete this and change this to admin, then if I was using the term administrator, every single place in the database where I refer to the permission level that was administrator, I would have to update my code to say admin, and that would be terrible. If a user changes their name, you don't want to have to go back through every single place in the database where you refer to that user and change their name. That would be ridiculous. It would be too much work, and you would never get it right. So that's where the power of the ID comes in. So instead of referring to the actual permission level, you're referring to the permission ID. So if I were to come in here and look at users, I'll show you this real quick. If I were to come in here and look at users, and I see that I have a user ID of 1 and a user ID of 2, and 1 is admin and 2 is that kiosk one. So if I come in here to user permission matches, you'll see that I have these few rows in here. So I have user ID 1, user ID 2, permission ID 1, 2, 1, 4. So what this basically does, this is the power of how the relational database works. Just to confirm, my user ID as admin is 1, okay? So if I come to user permission matches, I see, if I look at user ID 1, I see that I have permission level 1 and I have permission level 2. And so if I come back here to the permissions thing, I can see that I'm a regular user and I'm an admin. But instead of storing my name, we just stored my user ID. And that's because if my name changes, my user ID will not. I'm going to say that one more time. Names and titles and category names and all that kind of stuff, they can change, but the user IDs do not. If this permission 2 is always permission 2 no matter what you call it. So you can change it, friend zone if you want, but it's still permission level 2 and I still have it. And so I know this may not be the best example, but we are going to use this idea of IDs all throughout the code. So when we look here at students, we see, I'm going to sort this by ID, we see that each one of them has their own ID. And when I purposely deleted number 2, it just went on and made a number 3. And so if we create a new one, they're automatically going to be given number 13. And so instead of referring to Bill Gates, we're going to refer to student 11. And the reason for that is because Bill might decide that he wants to be called Billy. And we want to make sure that we don't lose his account if he changes his name from Bill to Billy. So again, you're going to see this in practice, but I want to drill in your head that the idea of these unique IDs per row is going to be super critical to how databases work. We are constantly going to refer to these IDs. And when you have tables, they're so often going to have ID, and that's a way for us to cross-reference from one table to another. So we're going to get into that a little bit more in the next video. We're actually going to make something where we're starting to add possibly and remove money. But in order to do that, we need to have an idea of this concept of the ID is what links all of these different tables together in the database.